Hey guys, it's History Behind the Warrior, and welcome back to a long-awaited episode, and the return of the History of series to the channel. I know, it's been a very long time, but I have been purposely shelving this episode in particular, because it only felt right to actually do it, when we finally got the release date for God of War Ragnarok, seeing as he is the centerpiece of this story. Now, with us having learnt what we have about the Norse mythos, today I will be breaking down the origins of Atreus' story, the mystery surrounding his birth, and of course, his journey and rise to somewhat godhood. I also do wish to point out that this will be part 1 of 2 episodes centered around this character, as the second half is planned as the history of Loki. I wanted to do this to somewhat conclude his story and rise to the mantle. But before we do touch on that, as always guys, before this begins, I would super appreciate it if we could first get this video to about 500 likes. It's a great way of not only supporting this video, but this channel as a whole. It is a very small minor thing, but it really does go a long way, especially with pushing my content out there. So, with that now out the way, let's get on to the video, shall we? Now, Atreus is the child of Laufey, the giantess, and the exiled god and former Olympian, Kratos. So, from birth, Atreus in many ways was bound for greatness. But despite his own heritage, this was all largely kept secret from him. So Atreus grew up largely believing that he was mortal, and so never came to terms with who he actually was. From a very young age, he was an extremely polite yet shy boy, being raised for the most part by his mother Faye. He shared an extremely special bond with her, as she taught him how to read, write, and even make a bow. The bond was truly something that was special, and in many ways unbreakable. Kratos, on the other hand, had a very uneasy relationship with Atreus, because for many years following Atreus' birth, Kratos would largely spend his days in isolation, learning to channel his rage and suffering in order to become a better man, a better father. But because of this, Atreus would ultimately feel like a disappointment, as if his father had rejected him for his weakness. And that statement wasn't entirely false, because from birth, Atreus suffered from a mysterious illness, one that plagued him every single day, and could even render him immobile. Little did Atreus or Kratos actually know, but this was in fact Atreus' own godhood manifesting. So for a large part of Atreus' life, he would be homebound with Faye, learning more about his home and the gods that inhabited it. Now, there is a very loose comic book tie-in series of the same name. This small and limited run takes place after Atreus' birth and just before Faye does fall ill. It does largely focus on Kratos and how he's learning to channel his rage. Unfortunately, his training does provoke a clan of berserkers, and after defeating them, they would try to murder both him and Atreus, following the Spartan home and planning to destroy their home. With Faye absent, Kratos was forced to give in to his bloodlust and murdered them all. As expected, due to how somewhat minor these events are, they are never touched on in-game, despite being part of the main canon. Now, not too long after the events of the comic is where Faye would fall gravely ill. She would later pass on, but on her deathbed, Atreus would pray to his mother, as well as ask her for some guidance, because before she had passed, she requested that both Kratos and Atreus scatter her ashes on the highest peak in all of the 9 realms, a dream she wished that both of them do together. But despite her pleas, the passing of Faye did not actually bring the two together. Instead, it did nothing but tear open the rift in their relationship. Now, regardless of how either of them felt, they would still try to follow through on Faye's last request. But once she was cremated, Kratos would test Atreus, wishing to gauge whether or not his son could truly be ready for a journey this far out of their home. So together, they would begin to hunt deer. And this hunt, very much so, showed just how inexperienced and somewhat naive Atreus was. Even with the deer injured, Atreus was ultimately unable to finish the job, something that Kratos had to help him do. But before they could claim their prize, they would be ambushed by a hungry troll, seeking to devour them as well as the deer. With their combined effort, the two were able to overpower the troll. But in its death is where Atreus' rage would first manifest, as he begins to maliciously hack away at the corpse of the dead troll. He did so till he was exhausted and began to cough aggressively, the first sign of his god rage surfacing. Because of this, Kratos at first refused to take Atreus on Faye's quest, believing that the biggest danger to him was actually himself. His lack of self-control and inexperience would make the journey nearly impossible, so Kratos would decide to leave him at home. That is, until there was a knock at their door. The outspoken stranger seemingly provoked the attention of Kratos, speaking in cryptic sentences that did nothing but worry him. Because of this, Atreus would be forced beneath the floorboards as he went to confront this man. Here, Atreus would listen beneath the floorboards till he heard screams and loud bangs that rippled throughout the house. After a brief moment of silence, he would be found by his father, and once Atreus surfaced above the house, he saw the devastation that had been laid waste. With their home now compromised, Kratos had no choice but to take his son with him. So does their journey truly begin to spread Faye's ashes? And it is extremely early on that Atreus must come to terms with the idea of strengthening his heart and hardening his own resolve. He must be willing to kill in order to survive. And although extremely difficult, this is eventually something he does come to grips with. During this trip, Atreus continues to attempt to connect with Kratos, showing his impressive knowledge of both language and how to read runes. But the only time they actually connect is when they fight together or they hunt. And this time it would be a boar, but one of magical properties. Their pursuit actually leads to the two getting separated by a wall of fog. And even whilst Atreus is successful in incapacitating the boar, this provokes the rage of the Witch of the Woods, outraged as the young boy had injured her friend. Scared and apologetic, Atreus immediately tries to fix his error, and once his father arrives, together they assist the witch in helping the boar back to health, taking it back to her home and grabbing Lancrest for its wounds. Once done, the two fall back on their plan once more, looking to reach the highest peak in Midgard, but by doing so, encounter the Lake of the Nine, as well as Jormungandr, the World Serpent. Once the two draw closer to the top of the mountain, they are unfortunately stopped in their tracks because of the Black Breath, an ancient form of corruption magic the Allfather cast at the base of the mountain. But it's here where they once again encounter the Witch of the Woods. Sensing that their quest was a noble one, she would offer to help the two, guiding them to the realm of Alfheim, as it was only the light of that realm that could purge Odin's curse. But upon entering the realm herself, she is quickly snatched away, leaving the two lost in the realm of the elves. And it's here where things take a very strange turn. You see, the realm of Alfheim is extremely hostile. Engulfed in a civil war, Atreus' telepathy goes absolutely haywire, as he can hear every scream and cry throughout the entire realm. It is unlike anything he has heard before. As they push deeper to the light of Alfheim, the disconnect between Kratos and Atreus truly begins to surface. As once Kratos steps into the light, Atreus is left alone by himself, forced to fend off an endless wave of elves. In fact, it does get so bad that Atreus eventually is forced to pull Kratos out. And from this point onwards, Atreus becomes extremely open with his own disdain towards Kratos, telling him that he never truly cared for him. But despite his own feelings, Kratos retorts that that was not the case, and that his callousness is simply a part of how he grieves. Once back in Midgard, the two are finally able to climb up to the mountain, but it is a perilous and tough journey, one that pushes Atreus to his own limits, as they battle the likes of Draugrs, trolls, and even a dragon. Hell, even as a reward, they would be gifted with mistletoe arrows by the kind dwarven blacksmith, Sindri. Step by step, the two inevitably reach the top of the mountain, where they are able to finally take a breather. And it's here where they realize their long journey has in fact damaged Atreus' bow. So with it repaired with a mistletoe arrowhead, the two continue on. And as they climb to the top, they are finally able to deduce who attacked them at their home: Balder, a son of Odin and Asgard's child of light. But he wasn't alone. He would be accompanied by the likes of Magni and Modi, the sons of Thor, and the Odinsons would attempt to interrogate an unseen figure. But the mysterious figure simply refuses, telling the trio to piss off. With the Aesir frustrated, they soon leave, and once the two reach the top, they are finally able to see this hidden figure, Mimir, the former advisor of Odin and the smartest man in all the 9 realms. Despite his curse to an unbreakable tree, he seems quite joyful to meet the young Atreus and stoic Kratos. But once he learns of their quest, he does have to regrettably inform them that the highest peak was never in Midgard. That would be all the way in Jotunheim, somewhere he could actually take them. And so, Mimir's head would then be severed, and together, Atreus and Kratos would travel back to the Witch of the Woods, seeking to resurrect Mimir. But once they entered her hut, the witch was shocked over seeing the young Atreus in possession of mistletoe arrows. She would take them from him and warn him to destroy any that he would find, as mistletoe was seen as a bad omen to the witch. With this out the way, Mimir would then be revived, and it's here where they would learn that the witch's true identity was in fact Freya, the former wife of the Allfather. Her secrecy caused a rift of distrust between Kratos and Freya. But to Atreus, he saw no problem with her hiding her identity. He simply just understood that his father never really liked gods. Now, to enter the realm of Jotunheim, they required a fragment of Falmer's chisel, a dead giant located in the north. But this was no simple task, and it got even more complicated when they would be confronted by Magni and Modi. The arrogance of the Odinsons knew no bound, as they mocked Atreus for his scars, and then made it personal by dragging Faye into it. Together, the two are able to kill Magni, with Modi running away. But it's very clear that after their fight, Atreus is still reeling from the battle, beginning to cough blood. With Chisel now in hand, the two descend into Tyr's vault. But as they do so, the two would be ambushed by Modi, incapacitating Kratos and mocking Atreus for his own weakness. And this finally causes Atreus to snap, triggering his own repressed Spartan rage. But due to his inexperience, he very quickly fizzles out into a coma-like state. And after Kratos dispatches of Modi, he would immediately bring the young boy to Freya, hoping that she may be able to mend the damage done. But this can only be done by acquiring the heart of Helheim's Bridgekeeper. But once Atreus is restored, the young boy quickly comes to distrust Kratos, hearing of how he was cursed. So after years of secrets and silence, Kratos finally reveals the truth to him, that Atreus himself is in fact half god. Kratos had purposely hoped that by not telling him, he could possibly spare him of this horrible burden, as godhood is a life of anguish and suffering. But instead of heeding his father's warning, Atreus decides to fully embrace his godhood, seeking to understand his own strengths and abilities. But things take an ugly turn very fast, because as they descend into Tyr's vault, Atreus very quickly becomes self-absorbed in his divinity, developing a god complex, if you would. Because of this, he becomes very callous and cruel to others, and after acquiring the Black Rune, things really get out of hand, as he raises his own voice to Sindri, belittles his own dead mother, and even kills Modi, despite Kratos telling him not to. It is only once they reach the top of the tower where things really go south, as once they begin to open the bridge to Jotunheim, the two would be attacked by Balder, and the gate itself would be destroyed, causing a lot of frustration from Atreus aimed at his father, and feeling like his father's own incompetence is responsible for all of their issues. Atreus would fire an arrow at him, stunning him in place as he attempted to fight Balder alone. But the Aesir god can't help but laugh at his impressive newfound confidence. Regardless, he simply sees Atreus as a fly, and very quickly renders him unconscious. When he awakens, he finds himself at the Bifrost Gate, where Kratos and Balder are still fighting, but on the brink of defeat. Kratos is able to lock in the Bifrost to the realm of Helheim, and it's here where all three are cast into the underworld. Once there, Atreus is scolded for his new change of character, being told to regain his senses and clear his thoughts. As the two travel together throughout Hell, we begin to see the realm itself torture Atreus, having him relive his murder of Modi. But what's interesting here is that Atreus himself has absolutely no recollection of these events transpiring, having to come to terms with his actions. Atreus seeks to mend their relationship, but this will have to come later, as during their escape, they come across Balder once more, but instead of attacking him, they decide to sneak past him and learn of his own regrets, that Balder is the son of Freya. And Kratos isn't excluded in that respect, as once they are on the verge of escaping, Atreus bears witness to one final memory. One that Kratos has hidden from him. One where he witnesses his very young father brutally bludgeoning a man to death. But before they can watch it in its entirety, Atreus is forced to save his father and brings them back to the Bifrost Bridge. It's here where they learn of one final way to enter Jotunheim, the restoration of the Jotunheim Bridge. Now this was no easy thing to do, as they had to retrieve the gate from a hidden spot in the World Tree, and whilst the gate itself was restored, they still needed a Bifrost key in order to open up the gate, and this could only be done with Mimir's missing eye. But luckily, this was located in the gullet of the World Serpent, so they would travel inside Jormungandr and eventually acquire it. All seemed well until it wasn't. The snake started to shake violently, being tossed and turned so aggressively that Atreus and Kratos were flung out into Midgard. Once they landed on their feet, they saw the serpent unconscious, and it's here where they are approached by Freya. Uneasy about the revelation of her son, Atreus chooses to maintain his distance, despite her warm and kind nature. But before she can understand why they are acting different, Balder would finally arrive, having his own issues with Freya for cursing him with immortality. He does at first ignore the two, but Kratos, seeing much of himself in Balder, seeks to stop him in his pursuit of vengeance. Sadly, his words fall on deaf ears, as they do battle once more, only briefly stopping when Atreus is struck with a mighty blow. But little did any of them know that the blood spilt on him wasn't actually him, it was Balder's. The mistletoe arrowhead that Kratos placed in his bow had in fact sliced Balder's hand open, and the mistletoe itself was the only thing that could render his immortality useless. So with his fighting spirit revived, the two sides battle on to a climactic end, with Freya herself getting involved by resurrecting the dead giant Falmer. The fight finally ends, with Kratos defeating Balder. But before Kratos himself can give in to that repressed rage and kill Balder for all he has done, it is Atreus that reminds him of who he now is. So by listening to his son, Kratos is able to spare Balder, telling him to leave them alone and to not lay a hand on Freya. But the cycle of vengeance proves to be far too strong, and Balder goes against Kratos' words, still wishing to kill Freya. With no other choice, Balder is killed, having his neck snapped, and Freya is left heartbroken. Atreus himself is left stunned, scared, and broken, as the words that Kratos had mentioned to him of a lifetime of anguish and pain have seemingly reigned true. But Kratos kneels before him, telling his son that they must be better, that they will not be slaves to destiny, and that each god can and should carve their own fate. With Balder now defeated, the pair are able to restore the bridge of Jotunheim, traveling to the land of giants. And once here, Atreus is finally given his mother's ashes. As they prepare to say goodbye, once entering a Jotunheim temple, a hidden mural is revealed, one that illustrates their entire journey from start to finish, and how Faye herself knew of the giants. By adding the pieces together, Atreus and Kratos learn that Faye was not mortal. She was in fact a giant. She was Laufey, the Protector, the last guardian of Jotunheim. And so, this meant that Atreus was in fact part mortal, part god, and part giant. Not all of the secrets were just hidden by Kratos. And as the two finally reach the top of the mountain, together they say their final goodbyes, and finally let Faye go, returning her back to her homeland and letting her rest with her people. The two then turn their sights to return home, but there is still one question on Atreus' mind, because in the mural, the giants never referred to him by his name, but instead the name Loki, something his mother originally planned to give him at birth. And whilst the two are on the discussion of names, as they begin to travel home, Atreus himself learns about the origins of his own name. Now, eventually, the two do arrive at home, where they are finally able to rest. But it wasn't entirely over, because with the death of Balder, Fimbulwinter begins, the final winter before Ragnarok starts. And he truly feels this in a dream, set years later after these events. Their home would be attacked, stormed by the likes of an unknown figure. But once they step outside, they realize it isn't someone like Balder knocking at their door. Instead, it is the bloody enforcer of Odin, the wielder of Mjolnir, Thor. Whilst a premonition of the events to come, again, already showing that Atreus' other inherited abilities are showing, Kratos tells him to shrug things off, as they must prepare for the long winter ahead of them. And like that, this has been it for the history of Atreus. Now mind you, there are a few journal entries here and there that do take place afterwards, but they are so incredibly minor. They don't actually add much to the overall narrative or story. With that said, I do hope you have enjoyed this one. I apologize if this felt a retread of the 2018 game, but honestly, it is hard to have it be anything but that. Atreus is still new to the series, and we ourselves are learning much about this character, as well as his journey. I just hope I was able to look at it at a different perspective and show you all the little bits of his inheritance that do shine through. This interpretation of Loki is very, very different from the Norse depiction of the character, and with us only being a few mere months away, I am thrilled and unbelievably excited to see just how the story of Loki will unravel. But for now, guys, this has been it for me. So as always, stay strong, stay well, and keep on fighting as Ragnarok comes for us all. Take care, everyone. I'll see you in the next one.